You ever get that sinking feeling after you click buy on a super cheap laptop, only to find out it can't even handle a single tab of web browsing without freezing? I've been there, and it's a costly reminder that the lowest price tag often hides a mountain of frustration. That's why I wanted to see if the HP Office EVO N1015V could be the smarter, more reliable alternative for anyone who needs a simple machine without the usual headaches. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let me be clear, this isn't a brand new Ultrabook or a high-performance workstation. It's a refurbished notebook that originally shipped back in the early 2000s, built around an AMD Athlon XP processor, 1.4 GHz clock speed, and a modest 128 MB of RAM. The storage is a 20 GB hard drive, and the screen is a 14.1-inch TFT panel. Those numbers look tiny by today's standards, but the real question is whether the machine can actually get the basics done without constantly reminding you why you should have spent a bit more. I started by testing the EVO in the exact scenario that most budget-oriented buyers care about, checking email, browsing a few lightweight sites, and writing documents in a free Office suite. With Windows pre-installed, the boot time is roughly a minute and a half, nothing lightning fast, but it's certainly not the endless spinwheel you get on many bargain tablets. Once the desktop appears, opening Outlook or the built-in mail client and loading a couple of inboxes was smooth enough. The real kicker, though, is the lack of background bloat. Because the OS version is older and the hardware is limited, you won't be fighting a slew of services trying to run at once. That makes it surprisingly stable for a machine of its age. If you're thinking about using the EVO for streaming video or modern web apps, you'll hit a wall fast. The 128 MB of RAM simply can't keep Chrome or Edge from choking, and the integrated graphics are only ever going to handle basic 2D tasks. That's why the sweet spot for this notebook is offline work, drafting letters in LibreOffice, managing spreadsheets that don't exceed a few thousand rows, or running a simple point-of-sale system in a small shop. In fact, a friend of mine who runs a tiny vintage camera store uses an EVO to track inventory on a local network. The device never needs internet, and the occasional PDF catalog opens without lag. For that specific use case, the low power draw and solid-state-like feel of the old hard drive, it's been swapped to an SSD in the unit I tested, make it a quiet, almost invisible part of his daily routine. One practical strength that often goes unnoticed is the built-in 56K modem. In a world where Wi-Fi is assumed, having a dial-up option can be a lifesaver for remote locations that still rely on legacy telephone lines. The EVO's RJ11 port worked flawlessly with a basic ISP connection, delivering just enough bandwidth to send emails or upload small files. It's a niche feature, but for a small business operating out of a rural area, it adds a layer of redundancy you won't find on most cheap laptops today. On the downside, the keyboard is a relic. The keys have a soft, mushy feel, and the layout includes the old Windows key in a spot that feels off-center. If you type a lot, you'll notice the lack of tactile feedback, which can lead to missed characters after a while. The trackpad is another weak point. It's small, lacks multi-finger gestures, and occasionally registers a click when you just tap lightly. For anyone who expects a smooth touch experience, it feels like stepping back 3 generations. Battery life is also something to keep realistic expectations about. The original 4-cell pack only lasts about an hour and a half under light use. I swapped it for a modern 6-cell replacement, and I could squeeze out just under 3 hours of continuous word processing. That's decent enough if you plan to keep the machine plugged in most of the time. Think a desk setup in a home office or a checkout counter. If you need all-day mobility, you'll be disappointed. So, who should actually consider buying the HP Office EVO N1015V? First, anyone who needs a dedicated secondary machine for low-intensity tasks. Small retailers, hobbyists who want a sandbox for learning basic Linux or Windows troubleshooting, or students who need a cheap, disposable laptop for note-taking in lectures, provided the institution permits older OS versions, are prime candidates. It also works well as a backup system for a primary PC. Plug it in, and you have a fallback for reading PDFs, printing documents, or running a local media server for music files. On the flip side, if your daily workflow revolves around modern web apps, video conferencing, or any kind of media editing, you should skip this model entirely. The limited RAM and processing power mean you'll spend more time waiting than getting work done. Also, if you're a gamer, a content creator, or anyone who relies on high-resolution displays, the EVO's 14.1-inch screen and